League, which all the best riders around the world are going to come for 6 consistent events across 6 weeks effectively, and turn that into an asset that we're trying to build. So that events business is a big part of our strategy. Golf TV and Golf Digest sit within that portfolio, and of course GCN. So within the Discovery Sports universe, Eurosport is certainly our anchor tenant and the most important part of our business. But these other businesses, very much fill out the ecosystem of what the sports businesses within Discovery is.
It's really interesting. And you've built out some incredible and interesting properties and relationships and partnerships with some of these rights holders, which we'll get into a little bit later. But Golf TV is a great example of that. GCN is a great example, going direct to consumer with a single sports proposition. I guess, are you sitting here at a time where you are now getting a sense of where you've diversified the business's rights package, I guess, or rights portfolio, and where the sports is broadcast? Are you doubling down in any particular area? Is it more and more content going into the Discovery Plus business? Do you see a desire to create and execute more and more of these single sports properties? Are you doubling down in that space? Is there a particular area you're prioritizing now, given you've had a little bit of a runway with these?
Yeah, I think the way that we look at it is actually probably a little bit different to that. If I can probably turn that on its head a little bit and tell you how we think about our sports business, and where we have strength that I don't think many of our competitors have, and it sits in the multitude of platforms that we own within our own portfolio, whether it be large-scale free-to-air audiences in local markets, and one of the hidden gems within the Discovery universe in Europe, in particular, is these free-to-air networks. Whether it be in the Nordics, in Poland, in the UK, in Italy, in Germany, in Spain, we have pretty big free-to-air pipes in each of these markets, which are an important part of our overall sports network. We've got Eurosport, which, as I described, 230 million homes, is a broadly distributed sports platform. And then we've got these deep digital verticals in specific areas, whether it be golf and cycling, or more generically, Eurosport.com, where you've got deep digital engagement with fans. And as I look at those 3 tiers of platforms, the question I ask myself is, how do we use our sports content across those platforms to grow an audience for ourselves and for our rights holder partner, and for the brands that come on board to sponsor us? And as I look at that portfolio, the number that always gets me is, every month we have 130 million unique individuals that come onto Discovery platforms to consume sports content. 130 million is a really big number that I think when you stand back and think about, wow, what does that mean? When you compare it to our competitors, that's huge. That is absolutely huge, which is why brands come to us to actually use that platform of unique access across all of those different platforms. And that's how we think about our sports business. And we use the content, whether it be cycling, whether it be, football, whether it be basketball, whether it be winter sports. Every time we're now thinking, how do we use that content on each of our platforms to engage audiences that natively sit on those platforms to drive the maximum value for ourselves and our partners? And that's how we think about it. So if we attack a new sport, that's how we think about it. If we attack an existing sport where we're renewing, that's how we think about it. And the deals we've done, for example, with Tennis Australia or the French Tennis Federation, these 2 recent announcements that we've made in quite long-term deals with these Grand Slams, which are core to our business, that's the pitch that we made to them, and that's what they've bought into. How do we use those platforms to grow their audiences, whilst at the same time driving that digital priority? So that's how we think about it, and that's how we can continue to drive our business. And that's why Discovery Sports is not just about Eurosport, but about all those platforms together.
Yeah, the important part, I think, of all those different single sports propositions and those relationships you have is the length of those rights cycles as well. You've got a nice runway to build audiences that are really passionate and engaged with those products and with those sports events and so forth. In markets like the UK, where you have a Competition Act which limits media rights being done in 3-year cycles, how much is that an impact then for, say, someone like Discovery to look at a market like the UK and go, okay, well, we need a longer runway if we're going to make this work for us viably, because of, having to change consumer behavior, having to build a business or an audience effectively from scratch. Although I use that term obviously loosely. How important is, I suppose, is that runway? And would it really, I guess, impact you going into markets like the UK where there's some very big limitations on some of the major rights?
Yeah, I think the 3-year rights cycle is challenging in an environment where you're trying to grow new business, and certainly for a media industry that's in significant transition from traditional affiliate business, which is under pressure, right? The number of subscribers is under pressure. The value per subscriber or the yield per subscriber is under pressure. The industry is looking for the new business model, the new digital model. And in order to make that transition, you want long-term visibility to be able to invest with confidence with a partner to be able to then make that transition. And I think the limitation on the duration of contracts is something that is really high on our agenda, and we are actively lobbying the regulators around the fact that prohibition or that challenge is actually making it more difficult for rights holders to actually help us and help themselves make that transition. But it's also changing, right? We've seen the Premier League, for example, undertake a number of 6-year rights contracts. They haven't stuck to the 3 years. So I think we are seeing that changing. With the French Tennis Federation did a 5-year deal with us. We're starting to see, even in a European regulatory context, which is quite challenging, those rights cycles starting to slowly extend, and regulators starting to understand better that offering longer term deals is something they're going to need to do in order to help the industry make that transition. But to your question, I think it's really important, and we are focused in areas where we can get longer term relationships. That's one of the many criteria that we look at when dealing with rights holders.
Yeah, and I think we've even heard a lot of speculation around the Premier League rights in the US, and the speculation is the Premier League is going after longer cycles than some of the other broadcasters are actually after, from what's been reported, which is quite a different, a different situation to what we're seeing in a lot of other markets. But let's shift the focus back to Tokyo 2020 or 2021 for some, depending on how you want to look at it. Obviously, it's only a few months ago. But a huge event, and no doubt a mammoth project in itself, let alone with a pandemic thrown in the mix. And obviously, in some ways, Discovery had been working on a number of technologies to help with remote broadcasting and things like the Cube and so forth. And I'm sure remote production was a big part of that piece for you. How did the Tokyo 2020 impact Discovery Plus? It was, if I remember correctly, when we caught up in April, you did discuss that it was going to be a kind of a key moment, or a lightning rod, I think was the term you might have used, for the sports vertical within the Discovery Plus business. So how did that perform for you?
Look, I think it did exactly that for us, which was really, really pleasing. And I think overall, the headline from the business point of view is that the Olympics was a huge success, and something that helped for Discovery Plus specifically really make the connection. Firstly, that Discovery Plus had been launched in a number of markets and really created visibility for Discovery Plus, and certainly from a brand perspective made the connection between Discovery Plus and sport more generally. And from a brand perspective, it certainly helped us make that connection, and that event and the significance of that event and the way it cuts through in every market, I think was a huge success. So in the Discovery Plus markets where we had launched Discovery Plus, the Olympics really did serve that purpose. We saw huge engagement on Discovery Plus. We saw a significant uplift in subscribers, and really importantly, probably most importantly for us, the way that we are retaining those subscribers has improved significantly versus what we had seen, for example, in Pyeongchang on a sports-only product, and really has given us confidence that the multi-genre single product approach that we've taken, so where we've put sport plus our real life entertainment, factual content, and great titles, entertainment titles, into one product experience with the sport, it is going to be a successful model, because what we saw during the Olympics as a fact point, which I think is probably interesting for the people listening as well, is for those audience that engaged in the Olympics, but also engaged in our non-Olympic content, we retained them 4 times better than the ones that didn't. So the more we can get our entertainment content into the pipes on the television for those that have come on for sport, the better chance we have of retaining those consumers moving forward. So as we look at those cohorts, that's a really pleasing fact point for us in saying, you know what, this strategy of combining sport with entertainment onto a single product is going to be a successful model for us, and something that we're going to continue to dig into for the future. Overall, they're the headlines. I mean, there's lots of different parts of it. There was challenges, logistically in Tokyo, it was hard. Our teams did phenomenally well in really difficult circumstances, and we're really proud of the effort that all of our teams put in to deliver that show. And I think the PR in the markets was also really strong when we compared what we produced on air versus what the free-to-air broadcasters were doing. We took a very definitive difference from what we thought the national broadcasters in most markets would do, and that proved very successful, where we were seen more as the specialist broadcaster, more of the talent that we employed provided better analysis and better engagement for the fans, and that feedback came back from the markets really quite strongly. So we're really pleased with what we produced. We're really pleased that we produced it in trying circumstances, and the results for Discovery Plus, but Eurosport as well, across all the markets, was really, really strong.
And you talked about the free-to-air broadcasters and sort of taking on that role, I suppose. 2018, I think, was the first time you took over the majority of Olympic rights, and Tokyo marked the first time you took over the majority of rights for Summer Games. And it marked, alongside that, the first time that broadcasters like the BBC in the UK were limited in the rights they were able to show to 2 live events at any one time. That caused quite a reaction with the public, particularly after the past few Olympics. Broadcasting, they've been able to broadcast every single live event available to stream on the free-to-air channel. This framework of rights relationship, I think, is due to run through to Paris 2024, I believe. But what's the verdict from Discovery's point of view? It seemed that in that instance, the expectation, the Olympics has historically been largely consumed on a free-to-air basis in markets like the UK, not in all markets by any stretch, but how do you see the verdict of what you guys have delivered, and I guess that shift in behavior that the consumer needs to adjust to?
Yeah, I think the starting point is in the UK and in France, we were actually the sub-licensee of the BBC and France Télévisions. So the Beijing Games and Paris will be the other way around. So we actually sub-licensed the rights from the BBC for Tokyo, and the same in France for Tokyo as well. From our perspective, we thought it worked very well, and from a consumer perspective, we also thought it worked very well. And one of the messages we've consistently said during the Olympics is we provided a 3-day free trial to every consumer in the UK who could come onto our platform, and if they had 1 or 2 events that they really wanted to watch, then they could watch it in that free 3-day trial. And then the cost of actually paying for the service was, effectively a cup of coffee, $4.99 for a month's of full content to every Olympic. We don't think is something that is prohibitive, and it's a nice way to do exactly what you described, which is, how do we get the consumer to understand that the new way of consuming, the new platforms, are just as viable and in some ways better in terms of what we can deliver than what the national broadcaster can. And in some ways, it helped create real penetration for us, right? The noise in the UK market, wasn't all bad. It was part of the education process that Discovery Plus is the home of the Olympics. The cost of accessing the sports content on Discovery Plus is completely affordable, and the experience is really strong. And we think it served that purpose for us in the UK and in most of the markets where Discovery Plus had been launched.
So what do you think the role of free-to-air broadcasters, national broadcasters, will be in the future? Do you think it's going to change dramatically? I mean, you taken the rights off of BBC in this instance, given what you just talked about. And that role has already been shifting for some time, as not only with pay TV expansion, but streaming coming in. There's just more players in the market than there were, say 10 years ago. What do you think the future that their role looks like in the live sports game?
Yeah, look, as I said at the outset, for us, the free-to-air broadcasters, I mean, the distinction between a commercial and public broadcaster is something different again. But free-to-air broadcasters, I think, have a very valuable role in creating awareness within the market. And the reason we as a business have invested in the free-to-air networks that we've invested in is because it does exactly that for us. And if there are free-to-air networks in markets where we can get better access, I think we'll take a look at it and have, taken a look at it in other markets as well. So we think free-to-air networks do have a very important role in the future. And if you take an example in Sweden with one of our biggest free-to-air networks in Canal 5, we put one football match per week on free-to-air, like Match of the Week. In Sweden, and that creates a very important point of awareness for the broader Swedish market about where the Allsvenskan content can be viewed, which is on Discovery Plus. So using that free-to-air broadcaster to create that awareness, we think is a really important model and something that most of our competitors can't compete with. It is a really strong point of differentiation for us and something that we want to lean into as much as we can. So we think it's really strong and really important and will continue to be strong and important into the future.
We talked about the Discovery Plus offering. There was a little bit more than a cup of coffee to get your taste of the Olympics and obviously a taste of Discovery Plus. That's one way of monetizing sports is obviously the traditional subscription model. We're seeing a lot of growth in ad-supported models across the US market in particular. I'm not sure if Discovery have. I believe Discovery have a strong advertising business in the US, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
But how do you see that shaping up, and do you think you'll see the situation where Discovery Plus will become ad supported as well as a way in, or is it already then I'm missing something?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. Advertising we see as being really important moving forward, and advertising as a share of our global revenues is a significant number, 11 billion in global revenues across all of our markets, and advertising I would say is probably close to 50% of that, if not a little bit more. So we have a big advertising business across all of our pay channels. And as we start thinking about Discovery Plus, and if you look at what's been launched in the US, there is an ad light model, and then there's an ad free model, and that is being replicated in Europe with the launch of Discovery Plus. And we see sport as being an ad supported part of that product as well moving forward. So we see advertising being an important ingredient. If you want to pay not to have advertising, you can in our entertainment portfolio, or you can have a light touch of advertising if you want to pay less on a monthly basis. But sport, I think, will be somewhat of an ad-supported model, provided that the user experience isn't compromised in doing so. And we're in the midst of investing in some ad tech that will create some sponsorship opportunities in a way that doesn't interrupt the viewing experience, because at the core, the live content has to feature on our products. But we think there are ways that we can create some advertising opportunities for our brand partners whilst not compromising the user experience in the way that we won't interrupt their coverage.
The balance, it's interesting you talk about the user experience, and the surveys and data show that there's such an appeal for access to live sports for free, particularly depending on which markets you look at. So obviously the opportunity there is the advertising is the key way to fund those sort of products and platforms. Surveys say they're more open to that as an option. Yet obviously the risk is the user experience, as you pointed out. You launched Discovery Plus, I think, in the UK in those markets with a subscription only proposition though. Why did you do that? Was it just you wanted to see was it a little bit of a test case, I suppose, like to see what sort of impact it would have to subscriber numbers? Or was it that the ad business wasn't as mature perhaps in the UK to start rolling out an ad-led model?
what we're not sure works, and we've tried this in the past, is a purely advertising-led model is going to be difficult to monetize around sport content in the most efficient way. We don't think that the ad loads and the ad pricing will allow us to do that in a way. So, if we're talking about a pure AVOD model around sport, that's not something that we as a business, believe in, and it's not something that is in our plans moving forward as something that we're going to do.
Understood. Now, let's shift the conversation back to Golf TV, because from my personal side of things, I think it's one of my favorite deals in the industry. Given the breadth of the partnership, the commitment, the scale, the fact that one of the world's major broadcasters is committing, business resource as well as technical resource into really growing a sport and growing a game, and very much, I'd say, ahead of its time. Also, the fact that this deal has that sub-licensing aspect of it, where for those that don't know, the PGA Tour, you guys have basically secured in a $2 billion 12-year deal all of non-US live rights of the PGA Tour, and there's European Tour wrapped in there as well as part of that. So it's a joint collaboration between the two major tours, and you're able to sub-license the media rights in any markets where I guess the value is there for you to do so, versus if not, keep it on the Golf TV platform. I think a really cool way to work, and I envisage that you must be having a lot of interest in other sports to look at this as a concept, or you're already talking to them quite a lot. You're about 2 years into this journey. You've said 12 years to lead into that. Can you give us a bit of a sense of how that's looking for you? I mean, I know it's early stages, and you'll probably be a little bit coy. Yeah, early stage, we'll work out how things are looking in the coming years. But you must be getting a sense of what the adoption of subscriptions been like, how the monetization side is to make up that gap of $2 billion you guys have invested into it. So what's that looking like for you now? Yeah,
I'm not sure I've ever been accused of being coy, so I'll accept that at face value. Look, the golf vertical within our business, like the cycling vertical within our business, is a great example of what I spoke about earlier, right? Which is, how do we maximize the value in the audience from that content using, our free-to-air networks, our sub-licensing partners, and what you've seen now in Europe is actually us bringing the PGA Tour content onto Eurosport as well, so that we can continue to push to Golf TV and Discovery Plus. And what's key is, monetizing the audience where the audience wants to consume. We've got a specific audience on Golf TV that are, high golf users, right? Super fans around golf. They want to see our Tiger Woods content. They want to see the instructional videos. They want to see the interviews and behind the scenes content that we produce. They want to see the live tournaments. They want to see the tournament coverage before the broadcasters start their coverage, because we've got feature groups and feature holes, and there's a whole lot of content that sits on the Golf TV product that really caters towards an audience that is just a golf superfan. And over time, we think that's a highly valuable audience that we can drive yield from, because they won't pay anything, but they'll pay more than you would otherwise get from a casual fans to engage with that content. But on other platforms, we've got a more casual audience. We've got people who like golf and enjoy golf, probably come in for the big events like the Players Championship or the FedEx Cup or the Byron Nelson or the Arnold Palmer or Bay Hill. They'll come in for the big events, but they won't watch necessarily week in, week out religiously, and they'll dip in and out of the PGA Tour content. And maybe Eurosport or Discovery Plus is a better platform for them, because they also enjoy, the cycling content or the winter sports content or whatever it might be. So using those platforms to engage in audiences is really starting to pay dividends for us. But the trick to Golf TV is providing a product experience which is sufficiently deep for a golfing audience to want to pay extra for, not less, but more for, because they get a richer experience around golf. And our partnership with the PGA Tour is designed to do exactly that. How we work with PGAtour.com, excuse me, how we work with our own platforms, how we work with the European Tour, and you know, the deal that we've got with the European Tour in a few select markets is designed to build up that ecosystem, which is, you know, in Italy, for example, is working really, really well. So we're trying to experiment with a number of, in some markets we've done joint ventures. We've done a joint venture in Korea with JTBC, which is, you know, putting their golf content and our golf content into a joint venture where we actually enrich that experience for the fans. So there's a number of different markets where we're trying a number of different models, but it's doing exactly what you've described, is how do we get that deep engagement with a golf audience and building up that ecosystem where you can then start selling other things to the audience. You know, you can start selling, you know, golf clubs, you can start selling lessons, you can start selling merchandise, you can start actually creating new revenue streams from that audience because you've brought them on platform. And GCN, by the way, is a really good kind of case study for us, because that's what we're doing with GCN. Albeit those businesses started from very different directions. GCN started with no rights, and they built up an audience based on non-sporting content on you know, YouTube and other platforms, and now we're bringing those on to GCN Plus with all of our racing content. The PGA Tour is kind of the opposite model, where we're starting with the rights and then building the community underneath that and bringing them on platform. But we like to find ways of super serving those audiences on those niche platforms, because we can generate, you know, incremental yield from those audiences over time.
So you have a strong, incredible broadcasting pedigree background with Discovery. You've created a breadth of content within platforms like Golf TV, creating a great experience for any of those passionate golf fans. You've talked about the opportunity of extending that share of wallet, as the terminology goes, of, but you know, looking to sell golf clubs, looking to sell lessons, etc. Which I think everyone is realizing quite quickly, that if you want to go direct to consumer with an OTT product, you need to have a diversified approach in driving more value rather than looking at having a cut priced offering. But how far away is that practically to being a significant, say, line in the P&L for you guys? Because at the moment, across the whole industry, the monetization of sort of expanding that share of wallet is still pretty early on. It's pretty much in its infancy. That everyone gets excited about things like NFTs coming and all those sorts of things. Is the new opportunity that everyone's counting the dollar signs on. So how far away do you see, I guess, at least from your point of view, the Golf TV product getting to a position where that e-commerce offering and the expansion of the revenue generation through share of wallet is going to play a real significant role in your business?
Yeah, I think we've got to break it down into stages, and the way that we're thinking about it is, firstly, the first stage is scale. How do we create scale in our ecosystem to be able to drive that? And we're just on the first steps of that journey. We haven't really even started yet. It's been a couple of years in, and creating scale for me is the number one priority when it comes to then figuring out how to better monetize that audience. I would say candidly, you know, GCN, given the scale that it has on its platform and its social networks, is further along the lines in terms of being able to monetize that audience better than Golf TV is. Golf TV is still very much in its infancy, and I see that we've still got work to do to create that scale on our platforms before we can start monetizing that audience in different ways. I certainly, if I was looking at the Discovery Sports portfolio, the first cab off the rank for me would be GCN versus Golf TV and where we are in that journey.
Good stuff. And now, so we've only got a few minutes left. Apologies, I just had a connection issue that dropped me out for a few seconds there. GCN quickly, I think we often sort of skim over GCN, but as you've talked about, it's actually quite a mature product and offering. Could you just set the scene for those that don't know what the GCN is, what sits within that business? I think you guys first got involved about 4 or 5 years ago and have since increased your stake in the business. So just talk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, look, GCN is a business which is designed to speak to cycling fans in a very deep way. It's a business which a chap by the name of Simon Ware started with YouTube. I don't know if you remember when YouTube was offering grants to create YouTube channels around specific sports. They did a tender process, and Simon, who was in the publishing business, won one of those grants to build a YouTube channel, which he called the Global Cycling Network. And, Dan Lloyd and the team down in Bath, built a very successful content portfolio around, technology and equipment and technique and nutrition. It was all non-live scripted content that engaged the cycling audience in a meaningful way. That journey then changed into creating our own and operated platform in GCN, and the GCN app, which is now available in all stores, Android and iOS. And that product is now been evolved from a great YouTube product to a product that actually provides information around cycling, which is really rich. So if you're watching the Tour de France, you will have all the teams, you'll have all the athletes, you'll have their kit, you'll have their bios, you'll have rich information about what's going on Eurosport or on GCN on the video, but you'll have accompanying information that allows you to assess what's going on. You've got the opportunity to editorial and news around cycling. So, what's going on in the world of cycling, what's happening with, teams and the members of the teams, what's happening with the launch of new bikes, what's happening with bike reviews. So, reviewing the bicycles and the equipment that's coming out. Consumers uploading their own bikes and people voting, do you like my kit? Do you like your kit? Who, hot or not is the polls and engagement. It's a product experience, as I described before, that allows cycling fans to get a much broader engagement in cycling than just the video content. Whereas, Eurosport and Discovery Plus is a video service. We're purely a video service. What differentiates GCN and GCN Plus is great content that sits outside of that. And one of the things that Simon and the team launched this year is, this documentary series around adventure and travel. And there is some amazing documentaries that are designed specifically to meet the needs and interests of a cycling audience that tell some fantastic stories that sit on GCN, again, designed to give a richer experience to that cycling audience. So the content portfolio and the product experience of GCN is much richer than we could ever offer for Discovery Plus as a video-only service, because it's been specifically designed. The investment into the product and the technology that is on GCN Plus is completely different to a video-only product, and that for us is again a really useful experiment about how does a bespoke product engage a cycling audience versus a video-only product engage a cycling audience, and how do we cross-promote that from one product to the other, and how do we drive value out of those things? So that again, it's in its infancy, to be candid, but the multiple platform approach from us, I think, is something that continues to be of interest in how we evolve over time. And time will tell how it plays out, but we like our hand in cycling, we like our hand in tennis, and in winter sports and in motorsports. We've got some real key positions in those particular sports, and in the Olympics, of course, we are the home of Olympics. So we've got some pretty big genres of sport that we think we're the home of, and it's a matter of how do we create different experiences for those fans across our platforms.
It does sound like, from what you described about the GCN, that if you were to build a modern D2C offering, that's pretty close to the playbook you'd be wanting to build from all the conversations and content we read and hear and talk about across the industry, particularly for single sports properties, to build connections with the consumer from a consumer and lifestyle perspective through to the top tier of that sport, have all these different channels and different ways of monetizing as well from a business perspective. Seems like that's all the key parts of what you would be building a D2C platform if you're building it today. So yeah,
I think that's right. The one thing, just sorry to interrupt, Nick, the one thing that I think is really important for people to understand, though, is we have no, the scale of GCN is not going to be large, right? When you're talking about Netflix and Disney having 200 million subscribers. And, as we talk about the future of our business, what we want to achieve, GCN's not going to drive tens of millions of subscribers. It only appeals to a dedicated cycling audience. And one thing that we've learned as a business in the kind of last 10 years of being in the digital space is scale is key, which is why coming back to this Discovery Plus, you need to be able to provide multiple reasons for a fan to subscribe. Sorry, let me rephrase that. You need to provide at least one reason for a fan to subscribe, but you need multiple reasons to keep them. And what we find is either in a single sport or a sports-only platform that at this stage, there isn't enough evidence in our view, based on the experience that we've had, that there is enough to keep those people on board in a scaled environment. You need broad-scaled content offering across multiple genres, appealing to multiple members of the family in order to keep them on board. And that's why we keep pushing this kind of scaled approach. And as we look into our future, I think that's something that will continue to be the priority. But GCN provides a narrower but more effective way to monetize that audience better. I see the ARPU from a GCN audience being higher than the cycling audience on Discovery Plus, right? Because that one's a scaled model at a lower ARPU, and I see GCN over time becoming a smaller audience, but at a higher ARPU because of the quality of that product experience. And making that distinction, I think, is really important for people to understand. The idea that you're going to have a single sport or a single league product that's going to be of scale, there's not many in the world that are going to be big enough to be able to do that.
And talking about being big enough, Discovery and a little merger talk sort of sprung up in the news a few months ago, and the merger or prospective merger of Discovery and Warner Media or Warner Brothers, I think it's Warner Media these days, I'm not sure, has been announced. No news of a name yet officially. I think that's still in the works, and no final date as to when that will be finalized. But what can you tell us about, I guess, obviously, is there anything else you can share around that, particularly from your perspective on the sports side? Warner has an incredible bank of sports rights and a wider library, of course, as well, a bit like Discovery does with their Turner Sports business. How do you have any sense of what that will look like as and when that relationship comes to fruition?
I think what I can share is the following. The name that's been released is Warner Brothers Discovery moving forward, which is really exciting. Obviously, the regulatory approvals that are still underway means we actually can't say very much at all, and those regulatory approvals are in the works, and we hope, and the group has given guidance that Q2 next year is kind of the target time frame where we think those regulatory approvals will be given. So that's hugely exciting. What I can say is, and from as much of an outsider in some ways as you are, in relation to what excites me, I think two things really excite me about the Warner Media prospective merger. One is the broader nature of their entertainment content gives us much greater scope to use sport to drive engagement, and I think that's hugely hopeful for us as we try to go for that scale. I think that scale model for me is where everyone's focused, and certainly the content that Warner Media has is going to give us an opportunity to have better scale. The other thing that I'll say excites me is the opportunity of having a sports network, TNT and TBS, in the US, and being able to approach rights holders in a combined approach over time is also hugely exciting. But the reality is, until the approvals have been given, we can't engage, we really can't talk to anyone about it, and we're all very much like you in a way, waiting for those approvals to be given so that we can get stuck into what is a hugely exciting opportunity, I think.
Well, one, the entire industry, broadcasting generally and sports, will be watching very, very keenly. Andrew, it's been great to speak with you and to speak with you again. Thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone. Bye.